want to talk about your story, or changing your story. One of the reasons that horses, and I'll say Mustangs definitely. I'll go ahead and get on him just because I can. That way I can see everybody. There we go. So when we talk about our story, we all have one. One of the reasons these horses are, I wouldn't say easy, but one of the reasons that they're trainable is they don't have a story. They have no story. This horse could have had a story about he was unfair, he was wild and free, and suddenly he got rounded up, and some of the other horses didn't, and why him and why not them, and then they was put into a chute, and he was getting. Let me talk about some of these things. I want to give you 3 stories in the Bible that needed to be changed. I noticed Facebook. How many on Facebook? Facebook has this thing, add to your story. I think you really don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't know. But what we do is, and that's a good example though, we add the nice things. We don't say, oh yeah, I had a big failure back in, let me put pictures of that up. We don't do that. So our story is just all the good things, isn't it? So here's what Hebrews 11:32 says. So the first one is this story that involves brokenness and rejection. And I'll talk a little about what that story can do to us. Here's what Hebrews 11:30. Hebrews 11 is this chapter. We call it the heroes of faith. It has to deal with faith, and has to deal with these people who through faith did all these things. So just a number of stories that involve faith. And he gets to this last part, and really he says, time would fail me to list all of them. He said, what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets, and he goes on. So probably the 2 guys in there, Barak and Jephthah, would be the ones that we're not as familiar with. Most people, Gideon was a significant part in the book of Judges. Samson, certainly we know about Samson and Delilah. David, Samuel, but these 2 guys, Barak and Jephthah, and yet Jephthah's listed as one of the heroes of faith. So let me talk a little bit about Jephthah. And he has a fairly short portion in the book of Judges. Now Jephthah was from the family of Gilead. He was a mighty man of valor, but he was the son of a prostitute. And Gideon begot Jephthah. Gilead's wife bore sons. Now, so this was not his wife. So then Jephthah's brought into the family, but he has a story when he arrives. Gilead's wife bore sons, and when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said, you shall have no inheritance in our father's house, for you're the son of another woman. Then Jephthah fled from his brothers and dwelt in the land of Tob. Here's what it says. And worthless men banded together with Jephthah and went out raiding with him. He had a story that gave him an identity, and his identity gave him his purpose. And before long, he found himself following a purpose that was less than what he could have or should have done. We're having some trouble with the sound system, so we're getting it figured out. But I can yell. So what happened is he ended up with this story that gave him an identity that then worthless people gathered. Can you guys hear in the back? Oh, perfect. Worthless people gathered around him. One translation says scoundrels gathered around him. And so they went out raiding. So here's what happened. War breaks out. His brothers go, man, maybe we shouldn't have let Jephthah go. He was the tough guy. And so they went, tracked him down, and said, would you come back? So here's what Jephthah had to do. Jephthah had to decide whether he would hold on to the identity that got him in trouble, or whether he would take an opportunity to say, I've got an opportunity to write a different story. I've got an opportunity to write another chapter that is different. And so he said to them, all right, he said, here's the deal. If I come back, will I be your leader? He said, I'm not going back to the same thing. They said, absolutely. He ended up with a great victory, ended up leading the entire nation for 6 years. Then the Bible says he was a mighty man of valor. When Hebrews is talking about the heroes of faith, it says, time would fail me to tell about guys like Jephthah. Not guys that had it all paved out for them and the sure guy that's going to move into leadership. But let me tell you about a guy who it was stacked against him from the day that he was born, and he was driven away from his family, and he had to decide whether or not that story was going to be his story, or whether he had the opportunity to write a different story. Here's the consistent theme that runs through these three and more, is that God was able to give them an opportunity to change their story. Their story could have identified them, and for the rest of their lives, he could have said, said, man, you guys are a bunch of bums. Matter of fact, I don't care if you get run. Matter of fact, it'd be great for me just to see you guys just trampled on. He said, yeah. He said, I'm gonna come, and he was able to not just lead, but lead the nation well. His story changed. He was not only victorious in battle, he was victorious as a leader. Horses have this uncanny way of just moving forward. Things can happen. I don't know if any of you saw the movie War Horse. There was some real touching points of that movie. But I think people would look at that and say, I don't know if that's realistic. But if you work with horses, you find out that it really is. Can a horse that's all tangled up in concertina razor wire and ever trust again? Well, you got these people. He said, you know what? There are people helping me, and so the story kind of changed. The most abused horse that I have ever worked with. I got this horse in. It was lame because of abuse. Wants to say hi to you. Lame because of abuse. It had been choked down, drugged through cactus, hobbled with these thin. This horse was a mess, and so I just let him, kind of figure things out, and I got it where I could touch him, and I saw there was just cactus all where they drugged through cactus or fallen and thrashed into cactus. I don't know how it happened. That's my story. I'm giving him a story, but I noticed cactus all in. This is a gilding. I noticed cactus just all under the groin, inside of the legs, and I thought, man, I don't want to be pulling cactus out of the back. I started working, and I remember the first one. I reached in there, and I pulled one, and he flinched away, and I thought, well, that wasn't too bad. He didn't kick. Grabbed another one. He flinched a little bit. By the third one, he just started to relax, like, oh, somebody's helping me. So what happens in horses is somehow they're able to say, this person changed my story, and that horse would follow me anywhere. I did a clinic for abused women and rode that horse for the first time in that clinic, and the reason I wanted to ride the horse for the first time is that the abuse didn't change destiny. We had to factor abuse in to get to destiny. But abuse didn't change destiny. I was able to give the horse a different story, another chapter